Good afternoon and welcome to the News Roundup for Friday, October 3rd, 2025. I'm Bill Thomas, and here's what's happening right now. Blame game. The GOP pointing the finger at Democrats and pushing for a daily tax on lawmakers as the shutdown continues with no end in sight. Going to battle, President Trump doubling down on military action in the Caribbean by declaring we're now fighting a full-scale war with violent drug cartels. And more nukes, a shocking new report warning that our nation's outdated nuclear arsenal is in desperate need of a major overhaul, leaving us extremely vulnerable to China and Russia. Also, Hamas agreeing to release Israeli hostages following a dire warning from President Trump, and a number of travelers say this stinks after a popular hotel chain puts smelly, bacon-scented alarm clocks in their room. All this and much more coming up right now on the Big Roundup. We have a lot to get to today, and we begin here. Right now, it's day 3 of the government shutdown, and both Republicans and Democrats are digging in their heels, refusing to budge from their positions and preparing for a long fight. Now appears as though the shutdown will continue well into next week before any substantial progress is likely to be made, forcing a mandatory mass reduction of the federal workforce and leaving the American public to deal with a dwindling number of government services. In the meantime, one frustrated Republican senator hoping to prove a point to his fellow lawmakers by hitting his associates right where it hurts, absolutely in the wallet. Even though the Constitution guarantees that lawmakers still get paid during a shutdown, he is introducing a bill which would impose a daily tax on all members of Congress that would rise each day they're in session until the standoff comes to an end. Additionally, a growing number of Republicans now ramping up the pressure by pinning the blame for the ongoing stalemate directly on that guy, Senate Minority Leader Chuck Schumer. Yeah, that guy, arguing that he's single-handedly responsible for rallying Democrats to cast their votes against the GOP's stopgap funding bill. Now, both VP J.D. Vance and House Speaker Mike Johnson say that Schumer is kowtowing to the progressive wing of his party. They also claim that Schumer is willing to lead his party to disaster simply because he's afraid of an upcoming challenge to his Senate seat from Representative Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, AOC. So, Democrats are holding our nation hostage and refusing to sign on to any stopgap funding measure until they get a deal which includes the extension of certain healthcare-related tax credits. So far, only 3 members of the Democratic caucus have been willing to cross party lines and vote to keep the government open, leaving the Republican majority in the Senate well short of the 60 votes they need to pass that bill. Final thought, and this is the News Roundup Lowdown. Government shutdowns. Look, it's a lose-lose proposition for everybody. This one's horribly painful, and here's what we're all suffering through right now. Services are being suspended, jobs are being lost, the business of the government not being conducted. And to pour some salt on the shutdown wound, the U.S. is looking absolutely foolish and perhaps even weak on the global stage. And unfortunately, given the state of world affairs right now, we can ill afford to appear weak to anybody. Sadly, the Democrats, under the fine leadership of Chuck Schumer, they're not going to budge, play fair, or negotiate in good faith, and all because of their demands. The country remains right now highly compromised. To be clear, Republicans have done everything in their power to bring Democrats to the table. Nothing has worked, and now it's a new strategy. We'll try to tax them into bargaining. It's a great idea and it might catch on, but I take it a step further. If our elected representatives are in a position to hamstring the federal government, then each and every American should step up and demand that those lawmakers not be taxed, but forfeit their entire fancy salaries until they can gather around the table, sit down like mature adults, hammer out a deal, and get the country back on track. Now, your tax-free thoughts and comments highly encouraged, and drop us a note via email. You'll find us at newsroundupwithbill@gmail.com. And with that, we turn to the News Roundup email postmaster, producer Davey, and big fella, who's going to chime in on this one? This is a big deal, and we're all feeling it right now.
Oh, yeah, people are getting frustrated, Bill. Here's one from Raymond in Minneapolis, Minnesota.
Afternoon, Raymond. Finally a Friday, and what are you thinking?
He says, pointing the finger at the other guy accomplishes nothing. We need action, not words.
Well, we're trying to find some action. The Republicans are doing all we can to bring the Democrats to the table. And there's a fine piece of action right there. You've got a Republican saying to Democrats, we're going to tax you. We're going to charge you if you don't sit down and bargain with us. We're here to work and negotiate. The Democrats, not so much. Appreciate you checking in. Davey, who's up next?
Here's one from Karen in Asheville, North Carolina, Bill.
Hi, yeah, Karen.
She says the loser in this whole deal is the American public.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, we'll get our say in the 2026 election.
Look, all those knuckleheads responsible for this chaos, yeah, they're making tons of dough, those fine Democrats with a fancy health insurance policy as well and a bunch of perks and benefits. They're living the good life while the rest of us are suffering, and we should all demand better. By the way, Karen, you said the 2026 election. Davey, you talking about the midterms, or she's talking about the midterms, right?
Yeah, I believe that's what she's talking about, Bill.
Yeah, the Democrats, they're going to feel this coming up. Absolutely. All right, change things up just a bit now. Take a look at President Trump's move to further protect our borders and safeguard our nation by declaring all-out war on a number of violent drug cartels and Latin American terror groups. The president now releasing an official memo stating that the U.S. is actively engaged in a comprehensive armed conflict with all of these organizations, thereby giving his administration unlimited wartime authority to strike, kill, and detain their members with impunity. The president's memo says that ongoing attacks against our nation by those terror groups have now reached a critical stage, forcing us to defend ourselves by treating them like enemy combatants and conducting operations against them like we're fighting on a battlefield. You know, at the same time, right now, the Pentagon is in the process of deploying a substantial military armada off the coast of Venezuela, with defense experts saying we now have enough firepower in that area to launch a potential invasion of that authoritarian-run South American country. And Venezuela is on everybody's radar right now. As part of their fight against violent terror groups, the Trump administration has carried out a number of deadly strikes against alleged drug-running boats in the Caribbean. They now say they've just struck a fourth boat full of narco-terrorists, which they claim was packed with drugs and heading our way. And they claim that overall, they've already killed 21 violent criminals as part of their operation. Security experts point out that the Trump administration is trying to justify their use of military force against violent drug cartels in the same way that the Bush administration justified their war against al-Qaeda following the 9/11 attacks. Final thoughts, and this is the News Roundup Lowdown. Now, with regard to the war on drugs, here's how it all pans out. Previous administrations have talked the talk, but the Trump administration, they are walking the walk, defending the country and issuing an all-out war on individuals, groups, gangs, cartels, and all the rest who are trying to destroy our country. Now, the president makes a rather lofty claim when he says that trafficking of drugs into the U.S. amounts to armed conflict requiring the use of military force. But I get what he's saying, and to me, it makes perfect sense. Here's the deal. There are tons of ways to kill someone. A knife, a gun, maybe a blunt object, even a baseball bat. And illegal drugs or poisons are every bit as lethal as each of those weapons. When those drugs are trafficked into our country, they're being sold to unsuspecting buyers whose lives are being destroyed and oftentimes snuffed out. Those responsible for bringing into the U.S., distributing, and selling those deadly chemicals are, at least in my estimation, murderers, and using military force to stop them from pretty much destroying our country and killing our citizens is well within the purview of our U.S. military. And of course, they're acting upon the orders of the President of the United States. Agree or disagree? Hey, drop us a note with your thoughts, your comments, questions. We're at newsroundupwithbill@gmail.com. There's a big battle brewing. Davey, to the email bag. Who's up first?
Okay, Bill, here's one from Mel in Phoenix, Arizona.
It can't be the same Mel as in Mel's Diner, right?
I don't believe it's the same one, Bill.
Okay, a different Mel. That was Vic Taybeck, by the way, was it not, Davey?
That was Vic Taybeck.
Yes, okay. Well, Mel, what's on your mind?
Okay, Mel says these criminal thugs have been killing our citizens for decades, and only the Great One has the backbone to kick them out, keep them out, and target them at the source.
Yeah, I think President Reagan had the backbone. I think President Bush as well. And of course, 43, the other President Bush. I think they're all very serious about curbing this problem with drugs. But nobody has done as much or has been as impactful in such a short period of time as President Trump. He's making a great deal of progress in a very brief amount of time. And we're still pushing forward with that battle. Thank you very much for checking in. And who's up next?
Here's a bit of a different view, Bill, from Mary Lou in St. Louis, Missouri.
Hello, Mary Lou.
She says, you can't just write a memo and then murder people without a trial. This is just an excuse to go after the oil in Venezuela.
No, we have no interest in the oil in Venezuela. We have plenty of oil right here. This has nothing to do with oil. This has to do with people who are killing people in our country, destroying families, destroying cities, destroying our country. Look, it's all about money. There's a great deal of money to be made in drug trafficking. Everybody knows it. Previous administrations, they haven't done nearly enough to address this problem. And look, if we're going to save lives and protect our country, we'll have to bring to bear extremely aggressive action and measures, which the Trump administration is doing right now. As a means to an end, he's doing all he can to protect the United States. Switch things up just a bit now, turning our attention to an alarming new report which claims that our nation's entire nuclear arsenal is falling apart at the seams, leaving us extremely vulnerable to an attack. The report warns that our current nukes are both dangerously outdated and much too small to deter the growing global threat, which is posed by China, Russia, North Korea, and others, who are all expanding their nuclear arsenals by leaps and bounds. The paper claims that more than 1,700 nukes we're now deploying are not nearly enough, and it says if we're serious about defending ourselves, we should aim to triple that number in the next 25 years. That's a lofty goal. And yeah, it gets worse. The report goes on to reveal that the newest warhead we have was built back in 1989 and that our current nuclear strategy is so old it was actually designed during the first Obama administration. The report was written by security experts who's part of the Heritage Foundation, recommending a modernized and diversified nuclear arsenal that's deployed regionally with the largest number focused on homeland defense. He also points out that unlike the Cold War days, most modern nuclear weapons are now designed to strike at the enemy's own nuclear infrastructure. And according to the Pentagon, China is now cranking out, and check this out, nearly 100 new nuclear weapons every year and is on track now to catch up with the U.S. within the next decade. Meanwhile, Russia apparently has thousands of non-strategic nukes scattered throughout Europe, nearly 10 times more than the U.S. That does not feel good. As is the News Roundup Lowdown. You know, in previous decades, the U.S. participated aggressively in an arms race, and primarily with the Russians. You'll recall that. Following that, and for a good chunk of time, the U.S. and our counterparts worked diligently toward arms reduction. But clearly, the race, it's back on. Many nations have just shifted into high gear. And by some accounts, we are no longer leading the pack, and that's not an enviable position for the U.S. to be in. Our comrades in Russia, China, North Korea, and elsewhere have a substantial nuclear arsenal, and by all indications, there's nobody in the global neighborhood who's talking about scaling back, so the future is beginning to look a bit more bleak. Here we have a couple of options. Option one, we could certainly add to our nearly $38 trillion national debt, spend tons of dough, and update and grow our nuclear arsenal in an attempt to remain competitive. And option two, bury our heads in the sand, spend more dough on liberal government programs. That'll make Mr. Schumer happy, and watch our enemies gain every possible advantage on the U.S. and the world. Now, look, Davey, I'm no big spender, but option one sounds a pinch better than option two, and we've got to do all we can to protect not only the U.S., but the entire planet as well. And what are your thoughts? Spend big and nuke up, or look the other way and kind of hope for the best? Drop us a note. You'll catch us at newsroundupwithbill@gmail.com. This is Life and Death, Davey, and let's go to the email bag. What are folks saying?
Okay, Bill, here's one from Lydia in Key West, Florida.
Hiya, Lydia.
And she says, if we build one more nuclear bomb, it will be one too many.
Well, we certainly have a pretty big bunker full of nuclear bombs, as does Russia, North Korea, China as well. The problem is they keep building and we keep scaling back, so it's no longer an even playing field. And if you want to leave the U.S. in a very vulnerable spot, then you make sense. We can save money and be vulnerable. But I'm of the other camp. Spend and keep up with the competition. I appreciate you checking in, Lydia. And Davey, who's up next?
Okay, Bill, here's a bit of a different view from Luke in Twin Falls, Idaho.
Hiya, Luke.
He says that guy is right. We need to update the arsenal of democracy immediately and aim it at the bad guys. America first, baby.
Yeah, absolutely. This is a no-brainer. We have to outspend, we have to outthink, we have to outmaneuver the competition. And we did for an awful long time, but the game has changed in recent years. Look, it is a game. And because the consequences will have a global impact, we can't trust the other team to do the right thing. There's a great line from that 1983 movie War Games. You recall that movie, Davey? That was Matthew Broderick and a bunch of other big stars. Remember the movie?
Oh, yeah. Very popular, Bill.
Yeah, the computer in that movie, Joshua is the name of the computer, says regarding nuclear war, it's a strange game. The only winning move is not to play. Unfortunately, the whole world right now, they are playing, and we're being forced to play along. All right, a couple of additional headlines we are keeping a very close watch on right now in the News Roundup newsroom. And first to the Middle East, following a firm ultimatum from President Trump, Hamas now agreeing to immediately begin negotiating the release of all remaining hostages, relinquish their hold over Gaza to an independent Palestinian Authority, and take the first steps toward peace. Additionally, the president ordering Israel to immediately stop bombing Gaza City so those negotiations can move forward. Moving along now to some developing news out of Europe. Authorities in Germany shutting down the Munich airport for a number of hours after several mysterious drones were spotted in the area. The disturbance becoming the latest in a series of similar alarming incidents throughout the European Union. No one is claiming it was Russian drones, but we're all kind of pretty much thinking the same thing. Now, some big news concerning both border security and big tech. And following significant pressure from the Trump administration, the Apple Store now removing a free crowdsourced app which allowed iPhone users for a time to anonymously share information regarding the activities of federal ICE or Immigration and Customs Enforcement officers. Turning now to the world of business and a quick peek at a couple of stories currently making waves in finance, also in commerce, and more. This could impact your bottom line. Following a massive sale of stock to a number of new investors, the privately held artificial intelligence company called OpenAI, likely now the world's most valuable startup, with the organization behind ChatGPT now worth a staggering $500 billion, which is odd because they haven't even turned a profit yet. Moving along now to some great news for the upper class. According to the Federal Reserve, the total wealth of our country's richest people now skyrocketing, with the top 1% net worth, the now net worth combined is $52 trillion. Yeah, it's an all-time record. And some exciting news to share from the world of healthcare. The FDA praising the new consumer-friendly prescription drug program called Trump Rx, saying the president's plan will make a whole bunch of medications more affordable for the American public. Davey, what do we call that? Do you remember?
No, Bill. What do we call that?
Davey, MPAA, making prescriptions affordable again. Life is getting grander every day. And now it is time for the lighter side of news, where we take a quick gander at a couple of scintillating stories guaranteed to make you stop in your tracks and burst out in song. And if you're like Davey, please don't burst out in song in the key of orange. First up, a story so good you can smell it, even if you don't want to. A popular hotel chain trying out a whole bunch of very special scented alarm clocks in some of their rooms. And the unlucky visitors who've tried them out say they're so dreadful, they'll never stay there again as long as they live. The Holiday Inn Express introducing a breakfast alarm clock. No kidding. It spews out a potpourri of stinky aromas, including sizzling bacon, steaming hot coffee, and even freshly prepared baked blueberry muffins. They say they're serving up the clocks to help their guests sleep better, wake up with a smile, and enjoy an experience they can't get anywhere else. And they got that right. You can't get that anywhere else. For now, those clocks only available in Australia, New Zealand, and parts of Asia. What about in Burbank here in Southern California, Davey? Burbank, yes?
Bill, no. Australia, New Zealand, and Asia, Bill.
But not Burbank. Okay, I've stayed at the Ritz-Carlton Hotel. They have some pretty okay amenities. Full-service spas, fitness centers, gourmet dining. That is some good grub. Fancy lounges, and a bunch more. You know, Davey, I've overnighted at the Motel 6, a fine sleepery. And they have some nifty extras, too, like free ice and color TV. And they even leave the light on for you. Did you know they leave the light on for you, Davey, at the Motel 6?
Yeah, Bill, they've been leaving the light on for years.
Yes, they have. So when you want it done right, you got to stay at the Holiday Inn. Affordable room rates, easy to make reservations, and you can't top this. Bacon and coffee-scented alarm clocks. I kind of like it, although it makes me feel kind of nauseous at the same time. Anyway, I'll take that over swimming pools and room service any day of the week. And the last place I stayed in, Davey, had a broken alarm clock. And the only scent in the room was bug spray from the local exterminator. Bad memories. Screaming along now from the fine-smelling presidential suite at the Holiday Inn to the search for an airplane missing for close to 100 years. And here's what we know. A group of researchers from Purdue University claim they finally solved one of the great riddles of the 20th century, and they're now putting their money where their mouth is. The researchers believe they finally zeroed in on the airplane of missing American explorer Amelia Earhart. Disappeared back in 1937 along with her aircraft while attempting to become the first woman pilot to circle the entire globe. Davey, I thought the Earth was flat. You're saying she was circling. It's not flat?
Bill, the Earth is round, Bill.
I didn't know. All right, I'm not a science buff. Now, they say that an image taken from a satellite shows that what they're calling a visual anomaly in a lagoon on a small island in the middle of the Pacific, which is located halfway between Australia and Hawaii. That wouldn't be Gilligan's Island, would it, Davey, or is that a different island now?
No, Bill, this is a different island.
A different island. Just double checking. They also say that next month they're planning an expedition to that island to dredge up whatever's lying beneath the sand and solve the Earhart mystery once and for all. You know, this really is an amazing discovery. And over the decades, a number of people have claimed to have discovered Madame Earhart's missing aircraft. That beautiful, do we have a picture of that? That beautiful Lockheed 10E Electra. Look at that aircraft, twin-engine aircraft. But all those claims, yeah, they were debunked. And thus far, nobody has ever legitimately found that fabulous airplane, the airplane's final resting place. This time, though, I think everything's a bit different. And I'm sure when the investigation's all wrapped up, it'll all pan out. And I'm sure this time, as opposed to the several hundred other times, it's the real deal. Pretty darn exciting. You know, Davey, we should also point out that about 15 minutes ago, they say Jimmy Hoffa, the union leader missing since 1975, they say he was spotted at a McDonald's in Manhattan. And no official confirmation on this one yet, but we are hearing reports that Elvis was spotted earlier today at a Domino's pizza joint just outside of Las Vegas in Nevada. All these new discoveries, Davey, if you're as overwhelmed as I am, I think this is just a phenomenal day, and it's going to lead us right into the weekend. And I like that Elvis fella. On account of his sideburns, they actually cover two completely different time zones. We'll see if Editor Pranoff can squeeze those big bad boys onto the screen, and they might not fit, but we'll give it a try. I love those Elvis sideburns. And that is a quick look at the latter side of news, and what do you think? And chime in with your thoughts or comments, and we're at newsroundupwithbill@gmail.com. Almost wrapped up, Davey. A couple of notes, and then we'll bust on out. What do you got?
Okay, Bill, here's one from Antonia in San Antonio, Texas.
Hello, Antonia.
And she says, those aroma clocks sound fantastic.
Yeah.
I'd much rather smell blueberry pancakes when I wake up than my husband.
Well, I think it was actually blueberry muffins. And to be honest with you, I'd rather smell blueberry pancakes or blueberry muffins than your husband as well. So we're on the same page. They call that simpatico. And Davey, who's up next?
Okay, here's one from Mandy in Moorhead, Kentucky, Bill.
Hello, Mandy.
And she says, Bill, if you could design your own fragrance clock, what flavors would it have? Thanks and love your show.
JB and I were just talking about this earlier. If we had our own alarm clock with our own fragrance or our own aroma, it would absolutely be M&Ms. And M&M plain, not M&M peanuts. But the M&Ms are the ones that melt in your mouth, not in your hands, and they just smell pretty darn good. You rip the top off the package, take a snootful. Oh, M&Ms. That is the perfect aroma. Davey, what the heck? It's Friday. One more, and then we'll bust out.
Okay, Bill. Here's one from Vic on the Jersey Shore.
Hello, Vic. What are you thinking?
Vic says, the search for Amelia Earhart is a waste of money. They should try to find that guy who jumped out of the airplane with all that cash, or the missing Malaysia Air Flight 370 instead.
Yeah, all these things are always a bit of a scam, but they give everybody just a glimmer of hope, and that can't be half bad. It's kind of like that time when Geraldo Rivera, didn't he slam into a bank vault or something, into a fireplace to try to find a bunch of dough all those years ago?
No, that was Al Capone's vault, Bill. He opened Al Capone's secret vault.
And what was in that vault?
A couple of empty bottles, I believe.
And what you're going to find in that island off the Pacific, same thing, a bunch of nothing. And now it is time for us to call it a wrap on the Aloha Friday edition of the Big News Roundup. And before we go, as we do each and every day here on the program, we share with you a very notable quote. And these inspiring words come to us today from the great Bob Ruth, who said, you just can't beat...
Bill.
Yes?
It's Babe Ruth.
Oh, Babe Ruth. Babe Ruth, who said, you just can't beat the person who never gives up. Babe Ruth. The great Bambino, they called that guy. A legendary American athlete who is widely considered to be one of our country's greatest sports heroes of all time. And I'm a sports nut. I'm a big fan of Bambino. Don't know exactly what he did or what football team he played for, Davey, but you're saying he's an accomplished guy?
Bill.
Yeah.
He was a baseball player. He played for the Yankees. He was a record-setting home run hitter and one of the greatest players who ever played, Bill.
I think I've heard of him. Kind of rings a bell. All right, I'll do some research into this guy. Bob Ruth, or Babe Ruth, you said, right?
Babe Ruth.
Babe Ruth. Okay. Now it is time for us to bust on out. But before we do, don't forget the News Roundup motto. Ask not what your podcast can do for you. Ask what you can do for your podcast. There's only two things you can do. When you're putting your shoes and socks on, put one sock in the other sock, then one shoe in the other shoe. Don't put a sock in a shoe and a sock in a shoe. I learned that a long time ago from All in the Family. And the second thing you can do is hit subscribe, because you don't want to miss even a single episode of the Big Roundup. And now it looks like our time. Yeah, it's officially up. So have an awesome day today. Enjoy the weekend as as well. Please stay safe. Let's all continue to watch out for one another. And with that, Engineer Jamie, please let's dim the lights. We'll gently fade to black, and we'll see you right back here on Monday afternoon.